All right, listeners, get ready because today we're going to be taking a deep dive into a topic that's, well, it's a little bit spicy. We're going to be talking about sexual fantasies and role-playing, but we're going way beyond the basics, you know? Like, we really want to uncover why these desires are so important for a healthy and fulfilling sex life.
You know, it's interesting because there's all this secrecy around fantasies and role playing, but in reality, they're a lot more common than people think,
Yeah.
and they're actually pretty essential.
Yeah, it's like we're all kind of carrying around these secret desires, these little sparks just waiting to be ignited. But what I find so fascinating is that fantasies aren't just about like acting out these wild scenarios, right? Some people just enjoy the fantasy in their mind.
Absolutely, it's really a spectrum. Some folks might use those fantasies to fuel their daydreams, while others might actually want to bring those fantasies to life with a partner. And, Dr. Justin Lehmiller, he argues that fantasies are actually a key ingredient for a satisfying sex life. He says that fantasies can unlock all these different dimensions of arousal, and they can even help keep things exciting even when the day-to-day, feels a bit routine.
Yeah, that makes total sense. It's like a built-in mechanism to combat that monotony, right? And
Yeah.
keep that spark alive, especially in long-term relationships. But it's not just about novelty, is it? Fantasies can also help us understand ourselves better.
Exactly. Think of it like a roadmap to your own desires. Fantasies can really reveal what turns you on, what pushes your buttons, even in ways that you might not consciously be aware of. And you know that self-discovery, being aware of what ignites your passion, that can be really empowering, both individually and in a relationship.
So it's like having this secret decoder ring to your own erotic blueprint. And speaking of decoding desires, let's talk about role-playing. That's where things get really interesting.
It really is. It's where your imagination can really run wild.
Yeah.
Role playing is about stepping outside of your everyday self and into a world of possibilities. You can explore different dynamics, try on different personas, and just see how those interactions can spark something different.
Yeah, like imagine a couple exploring a teacher-student role play. Or maybe like a scenario where one partner is a powerful CEO. Talk about a power shift. And Esther Perel, she actually argues that this kind of exploration can be incredibly bonding.
She does. She talks about how role playing can help couples to break free from the constraints of their everyday dynamic. It lets them tap into the sense of playfulness and create a space to experiment with different expressions of desire.
So it's not just about like acting out a scene. It's about stepping into a different energy with your partner, a different dynamic. And that can be incredibly liberating. But before we get too carried away, I think we need to talk about boundaries. This is where things get a little more serious.
Absolutely. We can't talk about fantasies and role playing without talking about the importance of consent and respect. It's the foundation for all healthy exploration. We're talking about open communication, making sure that both partners feel safe and empowered throughout the entire experience.
Okay, so how do we put that into action? What are some concrete ways that we can make sure those boundaries are crystal clear?
Well, it starts with creating a safe space for vulnerability, expressing your fantasies to your partner, inviting them to share theirs, but doing it in a way that feels inviting, not demanding, not acknowledging that not every fantasy is going to resonate with both partners. And that's totally okay. The key is to respect each other's boundaries without judgment or pressure.
So it's about creating this dialogue, an open conversation where desires can be expressed and explored without fear of rejection.
Mhm.
And that includes feeling comfortable saying no to something if it doesn't feel right.
Exactly. That freedom to say no without fear of repercussions, that's essential. And, for those times when things start to get a little heated, agreeing on a safe word can be really empowering. It gives both partners a clear signal to pause, readjust, or even stop completely if they need to.
So it's like having an emergency brake for those moments when the fantasy might be veering off course. Just a way to make sure that everyone feels safe and in control.
Yeah.
And it's a good reminder that fantasies, while they're incredibly powerful, they're not a magic cure-all for relationship problems.
Right. Fantasies can enhance a healthy relationship, but they can't replace the basics like trust, respect, and a genuine connection.
Yeah, it's about integrating those desires into the fabric of the relationship, not using them as a Band-Aid.
Exactly. And, Dr. Limiller points out that sharing fantasies can actually be a really profound act of intimacy. It's a way of saying, I trust you with this vulnerable part of myself. And that trust can be incredibly bonding.
It's like giving someone a key to this hidden room inside yourself. That's such a beautiful way to think about it. But this brings up another question. Are all fantasies created equal? I mean, we hear about healthy fantasies and those that are maybe not so healthy. How do we navigate those distinctions?
Well, that's a question a lot of people struggle with, and the truth is there's no easy answer. There's not like a checklist for healthy versus unhealthy. It's really nuanced, and context matters a lot.
Yeah, so where do we even begin to unpack all of that? It can feel like we're wading into some pretty murky waters.
I think a good place to start is just remembering that fantasies are in the realm of imagination. They're not necessarily a reflection of what we would actually do in real life. There's a difference between fantasy and action.
Right? That separation between thought and action.
Mm.
But I imagine there are some fantasies that would be, you know, red flags, like those that involve things that are non-consensual or harmful.
Absolutely, those are unequivocally off limits. But then there are those gray areas, like fantasies that explore power dynamics, dominance and submission.
Right, those ones that push the boundaries a little bit,
Yeah.
but don't necessarily cross a hard line. So how do we navigate those more ambiguous territories?
Communication is key. Just like with any other aspect of a relationship, have those honest conversations with your partner, explore those fantasies together, make sure you both feel comfortable and respected.
So even if a fantasy feels a little taboo, talking about it with our partner can actually be a way to build trust and understanding.
Exactly. Create that space where you can be vulnerable,
Yeah.
where your desires can be explored without judgment. And Dr. David Schnarch, in his book Passionate Marriage, he talks about how these conversations can really transform a relationship.
Oh, wow. Okay, so what does Dr. Schnarch have to say?
Well, he says that confronting those seemingly taboo topics head on can actually lead to a much deeper intimacy. It's about moving beyond the superficial, engaging with those raw and sometimes messy complexities of desire. And through that process, couples can develop this really profound understanding of each other's inner landscape.
It's like peeling back the layers of the onion, right? And sometimes those discoveries can be a bit surprising.
Oh, absolutely. But even in those surprises, even when a partner's fantasy pushes our own comfort zone a bit, there's this opportunity for growth. It's about acknowledging those differences in desire and finding ways to bridge that gap through understanding and empathy.
I'm starting to see how navigating these tricky conversations can be more about the journey than the destination. It's the process of discovery, deepening that intimacy. That comes from really seeing and understanding our partner.
Exactly. And,
Right.
when it comes to actually incorporating fantasies and role-playing into a relationship, sometimes the biggest hurdle is just getting started.
Oh, tell me about it. It can feel so awkward at first.
It can. But the key is to remember that playfulness is key. Just let go of your inhibitions. Approach the experience with curiosity and a sense of adventure, and
Yeah.
you don't have to dive right into this complex scenario. Starting small can be really effective.
Right. So instead of trying to recreate our favorite movie scene, maybe we just try like a subtle shift in the dynamic or try a new position
Oh.
or use a playful prop or
Well,
something.
exactly. Just these little nudges outside of their routine, these subtle invitations to step into a different energy. And then as you get more comfortable, you can expand those boundaries a bit.
Start with baby steps. Got it. But what about those times when a fantasy or a role play scenario just doesn't feel right? How do we tell our partner that without hurting their feelings or making them feel rejected?
Again, it comes back to open and honest communication. Just acknowledge that not every fantasy is going to work for both partners, and express those feelings with kindness and respect.
So instead of shutting down the conversation, maybe we say something like, that specific scenario isn't for me, but I'm curious about exploring something that we both feel good about.
Exactly. Frame the conversation in a way that emphasizes that you're in this together, that you're both willing to find common ground. Exploring fantasies and role-playing should be a shared journey, where everyone feels safe, respected, and empowered.
Welcome back to our deep dive into sexual fantasies and role-playing.
It's great to be here.
I'm glad you're here. In parts 1 and 2, we talked all about understanding the psychology of fantasies and navigating those conversations with our partners. But now I want to know, what about the long game? How do fantasies and role-playing actually contribute to a fulfilling relationship, over the long term?
I think one of the biggest arguments for incorporating those things is that they can really help to combat monotony in a relationship. When you think about it over time, that initial passion, it kind of evolves into a more comfortable, familiar kind of love. And that's great. But it also means we need to find ways to keep things exciting and fresh.
Yeah. Like adding a little spice to the mix, right?
Exactly. Fantasies and role-playing introduce that element of surprise, and as you and your partner venture into these new territories, you're learning new things about each other, discovering desires that you might not have even known were there.
So it's not just about keeping things hot in the bedroom. It's about growing together as a couple.
Exactly. And that exploration has a ripple effect, because when you share your fantasies with your partner, You're creating that space for vulnerability and trust. It deepens your connection in so many ways.
That makes sense. But let's be real. Life can get pretty hectic. We've got work, kids, all these responsibilities. How do we keep that flame burning when we're juggling all of that?
You know, it's true. Life can get in the way. But you don't need to make these grand gestures to maintain a healthy sex life. It's often the little things that make the biggest difference.
All right, so give me the secrets. What are the little things?
Well, first of all, make intimacy a priority. And I don't just mean sex. I mean making time for each other, even if it's just for a little bit after the kids go to bed. Put your phones away, turn off the TV, really connect.
So those little pockets of connection amidst the chaos of life. And communication is key here too, right?
Absolutely. Keep talking about your desires. Check in with each other. Don't be afraid to suggest new things or revisit things you've enjoyed in the past.
I love that, keeping it fresh and exciting. Any other tips?
Don't underestimate the power of small gestures. A little love note, a back rub while you're doing dishes, holding hands. Those little things go a long way.
It's like their own love language, those little sparks that keep the fire burning. This has been such a great conversation. I feel like I have this whole new perspective on fantasies and role-playing.
I'm glad to hear that.
It's not just about spicing things up. It's about deepening that connection. Well, that's a wrap for our deep dive into sexual fantasies and role-playing. Thank you so much for joining us. Until next time, keep exploring, keep connecting, and keep those sparks flying.